Have you ever wondered why most people don't live long after 80? Not just wondered it casually, but really sat with that question. Really thought about what is happening to the human body in those years, and why so many people who reach 80 seem to fade so quickly after that point. Some people cross 80 and keep going sharp, steady, present, engaged with life in ways that inspire everyone around them. And then there are others who reach 80 and within just a few years, sometimes within just a few months, seem to decline rapidly. The energy disappears. The strength goes. The mind becomes less reliable. The world shrinks. And the people who love them watch it happen and wonder why. What is the difference? What is actually going on inside the body that determines which path a person takes after 80? Because reaching 80 is a milestone, a real one. It is something worth celebrating, worth honoring, worth being genuinely proud of. But staying strong beyond it, staying independent, staying mentally clear, staying connected to life in a meaningful way, that takes more than just luck. It takes awareness. And specifically, it takes awareness of 4 quiet but powerful forces that work against the body as we age. Forces that most people don't talk about until it's too late. Forces that many people don't even realize are affecting them, affecting their energy, their memory, their balance, their mood, their overall health, until the damage is already well underway. In this video, we are going to uncover the 4 real reasons most people struggle to live long after 80. These are not theories. They are not opinions. They are backed by decades of medical research, by geriatric medicine, by the lived experience of millions of older adults and the doctors who care for them. And once you understand them, truly understand them, not just as abstract medical concepts, but as real forces operating in real bodies, you will see something important. You will see that it is not about trying to live forever. Nobody is talking about living forever. What we are talking about is something far more practical and far more precious than that. It is about protecting your strength, protecting your independence, protecting the clarity of your mind and the warmth of your relationships, and the quiet peace of knowing that you are still living, not just existing, but genuinely living for as many years as your body can carry you. Stay with us to the end of this video, because the 4th reason might surprise you more than any of the others. And in many ways, it may be the most important one of all. Let's get started. Reason number 1. Silent inflammation that accelerates aging. One of the biggest threats to health after 80 doesn't come from outside the body. It doesn't arrive as a sudden illness or a dramatic event. It starts quietly, invisibly from within. And it has been building in most cases for years, sometimes for decades, before its effects become obvious. It is something that doctors and researchers now refer to as inflammaging, a word created by pressing together 2 other words, inflammation and aging. And once you understand what it means, you will never look at the aging process quite the same way again. We all understand inflammation in the basic sense. You twist your ankle and it swells. You get a cut and the skin around it turns red and warm. You come down with an infection and your body generates heat and soreness as part of its response. That kind of inflammation, acute, localized, purposeful, is the immune system doing exactly what it is supposed to do. It recognizes a problem, it mobilizes resources, it works to neutralize the threat and begin the process of healing, and then, crucially, it resolves. The swelling goes down, the redness fades, the fever breaks. The immune response winds itself back to baseline. Inflammaging is something entirely different from this. It is chronic. It is low-grade. It does not resolve. It is a persistent, simmering internal fire that settles into the body and never fully switches off. There is no visible swelling. There is no obvious site you can point to. There is no dramatic symptom that sends someone rushing to the doctor. Instead, there is just this slow, quiet, relentless internal process working against the body from the inside out. Eroding the lining of blood vessels, making the heart and the arteries more vulnerable to disease, crossing into brain tissue and disrupting the neural processes that maintain memory, clarity, and cognitive function, wearing down the joints, not just through the cartilage-specific damage of arthritis, but through a broader systemic irritation that makes everything stiffer, everything more painful, everything slower to recover, weakening the immune system's ability to respond to new threats, the bacteria, the viruses, the abnormal cells, while simultaneously keeping the inflammatory response itself running at a low destructive idle, and draining energy in a way that is very hard to explain and very easy to dismiss as just getting older. This kind of inflammation is different from the swelling you see after a sprain or a cut. It is internal. It builds over years of accumulated stress, processed food, poor sleep, insufficient movement, and exposure to environmental toxins. And while it may not cause sharp pain at first, while it may not announce itself in any obvious way, it is affecting everything. Your heart, your brain, your joints, your immune system, your energy, your capacity to recover from the ordinary challenges that life continues to bring even after 80. Think about someone like George. He is 82. He never smoked. He barely drank. He walked every single day for most of his adult life and considered himself a healthy person. But he often felt tired, a tiredness that a good night's sleep never quite fixed. He felt stiff in the mornings in a way that took longer and longer to shake off. His thinking felt foggy in ways he couldn't entirely account for, even on days when he had slept well and eaten well and done everything right. His regular blood work looked normal. His doctor told him he was in good shape for his age, and yet something felt off in a way he couldn't name. It wasn't until he saw a specialist, a doctor who ran a more comprehensive panel of inflammatory markers, that the picture became clearer. His C-reactive protein was elevated. His interleukin-6 levels were high. There was no specific disease causing these numbers. No active infection, no obvious injury, no clear single source. Just quiet inflammation that had been simmering in his system for years, below the level of ordinary detection, working steadily and silently against the resilience he was counting on. The body's ability to regulate its own inflammatory response weakens significantly with age. The same immune system that could once hold a careful balance between necessary inflammation and harmful overactivation begins, in the later decades of life, to lose that precision. It fires more broadly. It quiets less efficiently. And the habits and exposures that could be absorbed and managed at 50 or 60, the processed food, the poor sleep, the chronic low-level stress, the long hours of sitting, begin to take a much heavier toll at 80. Because the buffer is smaller. The resilience is thinner. The margin for error is narrower. Inflammation slowly chips away at everything. It increases the risk of dementia. It increases the risk of heart disease. It drives frailty. And most people don't even know it is happening. But here is what matters most. And this is genuinely good news. Inflammation responds to choices, even at 80. Even in people who have lived in ways that have driven inflammation for decades. The body's inflammatory systems are not locked in place. They can be moved. Not instantly, not completely, not with any single magic intervention, but meaningfully, measurably over time through consistent effort. Eating more whole foods, vegetables of every kind, fruits, legumes, fish, whole grains, and pulling back from the ultra-processed items that dominate so many modern diets makes a measurable difference in inflammatory markers. Walking every day, even gently, even for just 20 or 30 minutes, directly modulates the immune system in ways that specifically reduce chronic inflammation. Getting better sleep, which we will come back to in detail, allows the body to complete the nightly regulatory and repair processes that keep the inflammatory response in check. Managing stress, reducing alcohol, spending time in natural light, maintaining human connection. All of these influence the body's inflammatory state in ways that show up not just in how a person feels, but in actual blood tests. None of it happens overnight, but every step helps lower the flame. And with less inflammation running through the body, everything works better. The heart is less stressed. The brain is cleaner. The joints move more easily. The immune system can direct its energy where it is actually needed. And the body has a better chance, a genuinely better chance, of staying strong and capable long after 80. Reason number 2. Muscle loss that leads to weakness and falls. After the age of 60, the body naturally begins to lose muscle. Every year, without deliberate effort to prevent it, some degree of muscle mass disappears. And after 80, that process speeds up in ways that can genuinely change the entire direction of a person's life. This gradual loss of muscle has a medical name, sarcopenia, and it is one of the most consequential and least discussed processes in the biology of aging. Most people don't notice it right away. It doesn't begin with dramatic changes. It begins with the small things. The jar that is suddenly harder to open. The chair that requires more effort to rise from than it used to. The stairs that feel just a little more demanding than they did last year. The walk that leaves you more winded than it should. These small changes accumulate quietly, and because each one is minor on its own, it is easy to dismiss them individually. Easy to say it was just a long day, or the stairs are steeper than they used to be, or the jar was particularly stiff. But underneath all of those small individual moments is a single, progressive, systemic process. The loss of the muscle that once made all of those things easy. The problem is that muscle is not just about strength in the obvious physical sense. Muscle protects balance. It absorbs the forces of movement and distributes them safely through the body. It supports the joints and reduces the load that the bones and cartilage must carry. It regulates blood sugar by pulling glucose out of the bloodstream during and after physical activity. It generates body heat. It serves as the body's reserve of amino acids that get drawn upon during illness or periods of reduced appetite. And most critically for people after 80, it is the primary physical system that keeps a person from falling. When muscle disappears, balance deteriorates. The small, rapid, automatic muscular corrections that keep us upright on uneven ground, on slippery floors in the dark, when we misstep or stumble, those corrections require both the strength to execute and the neural pathways to execute them fast enough to matter. Both decline with muscle loss, and when they decline far enough, the fall happens. Think about someone like Frank, 84 years old, sharp-minded, cheerful, still living independently in the home he had lived in for 40 years. He had always thought of himself as a steady person. He didn't feel weak. He didn't feel unsteady. He just went about his days the way he always had. Until one afternoon he caught his foot on the edge of a rug, just a small stumble, the kind he would have recovered from without a second thought 20 years earlier, and went down hard. Broken hip, surgery, 2 weeks in the hospital, weeks more in a rehabilitation facility, and when he finally came home, the world was different. The walker that he had never imagined needing was now a permanent fixture. The stairs he had climbed for 4 decades were now a serious challenge. The independence he had taken for granted was suddenly fragile in a way he had never seen coming. What makes muscle loss so dangerous after 80 is not just the falls themselves, but the spiral that follows. One fall leads to fear of falling, which leads to less movement. Less movement leads to more muscle loss. More muscle loss leads to more instability. More instability leads to another fall. And somewhere in that spiral, the walker becomes a wheelchair. The independent apartment becomes a care facility. And the life that person was living contracts into something much smaller and much less than what they had imagined for themselves. But muscle loss is not entirely inevitable. This is critically important to understand. Some degree of it comes with age, that is biology, but the rate at which it happens and how far it progresses is substantially shaped by what a person does every day. Walking regularly helps not just for the heart, but because walking is itself a form of muscular work that loads the legs, challenges balance, and maintains the neural connections between brain and body that keep movement safe and coordinated. Gentle resistance exercise, sit-to-stand movements from a chair, simple exercises with light bands or small weights, balance work done while holding a counter, can meaningfully slow the progression of sarcopenia even in people who are well into their 80s. Getting enough protein matters more after 80 than at almost any previous point in life. Because the body becomes less efficient at using dietary protein to maintain and repair muscle tissue, and the threshold for adequate intake rises. Stretching, staying mobile, maintaining flexibility in the joints and soft tissues. All of it contributes to a body that can keep moving safely and confidently. It is never about becoming an athlete. It is never about performance or appearance or competing with a younger version of yourself. It is about staying capable enough, strong enough, steady enough, confident enough in your own body to keep doing what matters most. Whether that is gardening or grocery shopping or playing with grandchildren or simply getting out of bed in the morning without fear. Muscle is your body's silent protector. And after 80, protecting it might be the single most important physical thing you can do to keep living not just longer, but better. Reason number 3, poor sleep that weakens the body and the mind. Sleep changes as we age. This is true, and it is important to acknowledge honestly rather than pretend it isn't happening. The architecture of sleep shifts in the later decades of life. Deep, restorative sleep, the sleep that allows the brain to consolidate memories, the immune system to recalibrate, the body's cells to repair and regenerate, the hormonal systems to reset, becomes harder to access and harder to sustain. People wake more frequently through the night. They lie awake in the early morning hours. They feel unrested even after spending adequate time in bed. And because this pattern develops gradually, and because it is so common among older adults, most people eventually accept it as simply the way things are now, as an unavoidable part of getting older. But what is happening to the body and the brain across months and years of chronically disrupted sleep is not trivial, and accepting it without making genuine efforts to improve it is one of the quieter ways in which health after 80 is left unprotected. Think about someone like Alice, 86 years old, sharp and warm and engaged with life. She had been waking up 3 or 4 times most nights for years. She didn't think much of it. She figured it was normal at her age. She would lie awake for a while, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2, and then drift back to sleep. And in the morning she would get up and go about her day. But over time, slowly, subtly, in ways she kept attributing to other things, she noticed changes. Her memory wasn't as reliable as it had been. Small things slipped away. Conversations, appointments, words that she reached for and couldn't quite find. Her energy was lower than she expected on days when she had no reason to be tired. She caught colds more easily. She felt emotionally thinner, more easily frustrated, less able to shake off the small difficulties of daily life. And it wasn't until she had an honest conversation with her doctor about her sleep that the connection began to come into focus. The brain has a remarkable self-cleaning system called the glymphatic system, which operates primarily during deep sleep. While we sleep deeply, the spaces between brain cells expand, and cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain tissue, flushing out the metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. Among the most important waste products being cleared are the proteins, amyloid beta and tau, that accumulate abnormally in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. Night after night of insufficient deep sleep means this clearance system is chronically underperforming. The waste builds up slowly over months and years, and the long-term effect on brain health is significant. The research connecting poor sleep to increased dementia risk is now among the strongest and most replicated in all of neuroscience. Beyond the brain, the immune system does its most important restorative work during sleep. The cells that fight infection, that identify and neutralize abnormal growths, that coordinate the body's response to every threat. They are produced, activated, and deployed most effectively in a body that is getting adequate restorative sleep. The inflammatory regulation we discussed in Reason 1 depends heavily on sleep, and poor sleep, in a cycle that compounds on itself, increases inflammatory markers, which further disrupt sleep, which increases inflammation further. The hormonal systems that regulate appetite, blood sugar, stress response, and mood are calibrated during sleep. When sleep is chronically fragmented, these systems drift out of balance in ways that affect nearly everything else. But poor sleep doesn't have to simply be accepted. Many people assume they just have to live with it after a certain age, but that is not entirely true. Keeping a consistent bedtime and rising time, 7 days a week, without exception, trains the body's internal clock in ways that genuinely improve both the ease of falling asleep and the quality of sleep achieved. Getting natural light exposure in the morning, ideally outside within the first hour of waking, helps anchor the circadian rhythm and supports natural melatonin production in the evening. Creating a bedroom environment that is cool, dark, and quiet, and reserving the bed, as much as possible, for sleep rather than television or reading or lying awake worrying, trains the brain to associate the bed with sleep rather than wakefulness. Being honest about caffeine, which has a much longer half-life in the body than most people realize, and can still be affecting the nervous system 6 to 8 hours after it was consumed, and about alcohol, which fragments sleep architecture and suppresses deep sleep even when it seems to help with falling asleep initially. And movement during the day, even gentle, consistent movement, consistently improves sleep quality in ways that have been demonstrated repeatedly in research on older adults. After 80, good sleep is not a luxury. It is not something to be sacrificed to late-night television or irregular schedules or the accumulated habits of decades. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which the body repairs, regulates, and restores itself. Protecting it, treating it with the seriousness it genuinely deserves, can change how clearly you think, how steadily you walk, how strong your immune system remains, and how much energy and emotional resilience you have to enjoy the life you have built. Reason number 4, loneliness and the loss of daily purpose. There is a quiet danger that affects more people over 80 than almost any other condition we could name. It is not a virus. It is not a tumor. It cannot be detected in blood work or seen on an X-ray. But it works against the body and the mind in ways that are, at this point, thoroughly documented in the medical literature. It is loneliness, and it is the loss of the daily sense of purpose, the felt experience of mattering, of being needed, of having a reason for the day to begin. Studies have shown, large studies, rigorous studies, studies conducted across multiple countries and populations over decades, that chronic social isolation and the persistent absence of meaningful purpose can shorten life expectancy by amounts comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. That is a finding that has been replicated enough times, in enough different populations, to be taken with the same seriousness as any other major risk factor for early death. As people get older, the world often becomes smaller. Friends, the people who have known you longest, who carry the shared history and shared memory that makes you feel truly known, begin to die. Each loss is not just a grief. It is a shrinking of the social world that took 50 or 60 years to build, and that cannot simply be rebuilt. Adult children and grandchildren are loving but busy, present in fragments rather than in the continuous daily way that sustains real connection. Physical limitations, difficulty driving, difficulty hearing in noisy environments, unpredictable health that makes it hard to commit to plans, reduced participation in the community activities, religious gatherings, and neighborhood involvement that once provided regular human contact, and the roles that gave daily life its structure and meaning, career, active parenting, community leadership, caregiving, have gradually fallen away, leaving a daily life whose shape must now be created from within rather than supplied from without. Think about someone like Bill, 88 years old. His wife of 53 years passed 5 years ago. His adult children live in other states. They call on weekends. They visit at holidays. They love him. But the days between those calls and visits are long. He makes his meals. He watches television. He keeps things tidy. He manages. But he says some days pass without his exchanging a single word with another living person. And what he says he misses most is not the noise or the activity or even the companionship in the simple sense. What he misses is feeling needed, feeling like someone is waiting for him somewhere, like his presence in the world matters to someone in an active, daily, ongoing way. The human nervous system was not designed for isolation. This is not sentiment. It is physiology. Human beings evolved as deeply social creatures, creatures whose survival depended on belonging to a group, on being recognized and valued within that group, on the felt sense of connection and mutual care. The neural systems that regulate stress, emotion, immune function, and motivation are all calibrated, at the most fundamental biological level, by the presence or absence of safe, reliable human connection. When that connection is present, when a person genuinely feels known and valued and part of a web of mutual care, the body operates in a state that is profoundly supportive of health. When that connection is absent, when the felt experience is one of invisibility, of being irrelevant, of passing through days that leave no impression on anyone, the body shifts into a chronic low-level threat response. Cortisol rises, inflammation increases, the immune system becomes less effective, sleep becomes more fragmented, the motivation to eat well, to move, to take care of the body, to engage with the world, it erodes, slowly, quietly, but genuinely. And purpose, the daily felt sense that today has a reason to begin, that something is expected of you somewhere, that your presence makes a difference, is what holds everything else together. People with a strong sense of ongoing purpose sleep better, move more, adhere more consistently to health behaviors, recover more successfully from illness and injury, and live longer. This relationship between purpose and longevity has been documented across cultures and contexts. It is robust. It is real. And it is something that the medical system largely ignores because there is no pill for it. Purpose after 80 does not have to be grand. It does not have to be impressive or publicly visible or measurable in any conventional way. It can be as simple and as real as tending a garden that someone cares for with genuine attention, writing down family stories that only this person can tell, being the one who makes the phone call every Tuesday that a grandchild has come to look forward to, feeding birds every morning at the same time, volunteering in whatever capacity health allows, making meals for a neighbor who is struggling, praying consistently and deeply, creating things with hands, with words, with whatever materials are available, not for an audience but for the intrinsic satisfaction of making something that did not exist before. These things create rhythm. They create the felt sense of being needed, and that feeling, backed now by substantial and growing medical evidence, is genuinely physically protective. So if you are over 80, or if you love and care for someone who is, ask this question honestly and take the answer seriously. What brings purpose to today? And how can you protect that purpose, nurture it, prioritize it, talk about it with the people in your life? the way you would protect any other aspect of your health, because in many ways it is medicine, one of the most powerful kinds available. Final thoughts. If you have made it this far, if you have stayed with this conversation all the way through, take a moment, not to worry, not to feel overwhelmed by everything you have just heard, but to sit with a sense of clarity, because clarity is what this video was always about. Reaching 80 is a gift, a real one, but the truth is, many people don't get there in good shape, not because they didn't care about their health, not because they were careless or thoughtless, but because nobody told them clearly enough what was quietly working against them. Nobody explained that inflammation was building in ways their blood work wasn't catching. Nobody told them that the muscle they were gradually losing was the very thing protecting them from the fall that would change everything. Nobody explained that the poor sleep they were accepting as normal was leaving their brain uncleaned and their immune system depleted. And nobody told them that the loneliness they were quietly enduring and the loss of purpose they were struggling to name was affecting their body as powerfully as any disease. But now you know, and that changes something. Inflammation, muscle loss, poor sleep, and the loss of connection and purpose, these are not sealed fates. They are patterns. And patterns, when understood clearly and early enough, can be interrupted, can be redirected. The body is more responsive than we give it credit for, even at 80, even at 85. It is always listening to what we give it, what we feed it, how we move it, how we rest it, how connected and purposeful we allow ourselves to feel. All of it matters. All of it lands somewhere in the biology of aging. You do not need to do everything at once. You do not need to overhaul your entire life this week. What you need is one honest conversation with yourself about where you are right now, and one genuine decision about what you want to do differently. Because those small decisions, made consistently, day after day, compound into something far larger and more powerful than any single dramatic effort ever could. Aging well is not about luck. It is built, one day at a time, from choices that most people never fully understood until someone explained what was actually at stake. Now you understand, and that is exactly where real change begins. Thank you so much for watching today. We would love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing that stood out to you and what you plan to do about it. Reading your words gives us genuine encouragement to keep making this content. If this video helped you, please like it, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Your support means everything to us. Thank you for being here, and we will see you in the next video.